somewhere or another has to do with the activity, putting paint on a two-dimensional stretch canvas, in my case. I sort of followed along with that episode for many years. And in 1940, I was wondering, what are you doing? Is this for fame and fortune? What other possibilities might there be? Well, how about letting the beast out of the cage? Not in my social activities, but in the activity of painting. Where did that notion come from? When I was 40, as I mentioned before, I was confused. I didn't know why I was doing this thing, why anybody would want to do it. So I started reviewing anthropology. Who are the first guys that did this? Who are the guys that marked on canvases or caves before that, or barks of wood? Who were the first guys that walked along and saw their reflection in the water? Were they Cro-Magnons? Were they Neanderthal men? The discovery that he exists, I exist, separating me from the rest of the phenomenal world, leaving us to this dilemma for the next 50 or 1,000 years. We're going to try to figure out how to get back into the phenomenal world rather than being separated and viewing the phenomenal world or being confused by it, engaging in it. So these cave painters, they crawled into these black caves, scary things in there. I know I am engaged in scary things, because the hour of the wolf is when it comes out. This terror. I was interviewed and someone said, "Oh, you seem so direct, you're not afraid of anything." I said, "Well, you're right in a way. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm terrified of everything." So anybody that engages in the phenomenal world isn't terrified. He's not engaged. He's stepped aside somewhere. I'm okay. So these guys started marking on these cave paintings. First, just abstract things, just designs. We might call designs, marks, compulsive marks, and sizing it into a stone. Kilroy was there. Do you remember Kilroy? During World War II, the military guys that went from country to country, island to island, they left this face, a smooth type face with the hands coming down. It said Kilroy was here. And I have a strong feeling that what I do, and maybe other people engaged in the same, are leaving evidence that Kilroy was here. I was here. And how am I operating? Am I operating as a businessman, as an artist, as a picture maker? Or is there another possibility? And that other possibility is the one that I engage in. This one here was an appropriation from Braque, a painter I greatly admired, and I felt never got the fair shake because Picasso was so strong and so dominating. But they worked together and they explored similar areas. And this is an extrapolation of a Braque painting with a head, etc., etc. And then I started pulling it this way and that way through placement of one effort on top of another, one layer off after another. I could spray paint through a grid, I'd draw on. All these elements interfaced with me, with Brock. This one here was a seascape that Brock painted that's inset there, but it's also there. And it's also mounted on these floral patterns that I crossed with the Brock image of Dover with the little sailboats and inset, so 3 layers going on simultaneously. At the same time I do these still life paintings, I also engage in paintings I call crackle paintings. They're strictly abstract in the sense there's no reference. So I like the idea of being able to explore reference, no reference. There's no right, there's no wrong. There are 2 different situations. And most of the time when I was younger, I felt I had to believe in one situation. And I pursued that. Most painters I know do that. They work until they get an image or a gig, and then they explore that and produce that over and over again until it's either worn out or it's just another cliche. This is also a field where I put these floral patterns, and that sort of establishes the area the painting exists. And then I drew over the top of that from a still life that Brock had done. But in my own inability and ability to ape what he did or copy what he did. Well, I don't want to copy it because I can anyway. But I can ape the attitude of it. So it was a kind of celebration of Brock, this series of appropriations. In fact, I made a little seal that says a seal of appropriation. I don't know if you can see it on this painting. Let's go to another. Oh, there it is. Stop. Here it is right here. You can't see it very clearly. But if I'm going to appropriate Brock, I certainly want to give him a salute. And I don't want the world outside to get any ideas I'm pulling the wool over somebody's eyes. And what I'm doing is an appropriation. And I like the appropriation. I like to do what he did and the next guy before him, going back to the cave painting. What were they doing that for? Why did they crawl back in those caves? Terrified, killed. They'd have little bone things about that big, and they'd fill it with oil. And they'd light it, and they'd go way back, they'd make scaffoldings. And I went to these caves, and they turned off the lights for a while, and somebody had a flashlight that flickered a little bit, so you could see how those walls, how scary that would be. They thought these guys were doing that 30,000 years ago. The latest report is that maybe it was the Neanderthals the first, and that was 40,000 years ago. Cro-Magnon represents us. The Neanderthals preceded. They were lower, longer limbed, low frontal cranium, and that they were just animals. They still belonged to the phenomenal world. They hadn't separated and realized there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's that. Can you imagine that kind of discovery? And how terrified they must have been. These are some little drawings that I salvaged out of some drawings or a painting that he did. But again, treating the field, marking it up, putting a border within a border, locating it, all these sort of basic things. Next. Now these are the new crackle paintings. And that's where they should have gone in the first place. This painting is 8 feet high and 5 foot wide, and I make several in a row. And I was just putting paint on canvases in all the different ways through the years with the abstract notion coming out of Mondrian and Malevich, and as opposed to the organic or pictorial ones. Jackson Pollock sort of broke into both territories. He cracked that whole thing open, and it was no longer a landscape. It was just the paint, the physical paint as physical phenomena on a surface. And that's it. And these are what I call crackle paintings. I put a surface down, of black, say, and then I put this gluey surface over that. And when that's dry, I put tapes or sticks along there so that the paint won't stick there. And you have to pull the tape off, and that reveals these verticals, which are multiples of the 5 foot width there. So they're every 4 inches, I think. Then the second coat of paint that goes over this, when it hits this glue surface that's over the first surface, which was black, 3 levels, black, the gluey surface, and the next one, and I roll that in with a paint roller. And when it dries, it separates and makes these crackles. And by chance one day, I fell and hit my head on this surface, a big thing like that, and it crackled in a circle. So the next series I did with this, unfortunately, not one of them. Maybe we have one. These start to get a little of the spinners, the circles, this one here, and then literally to a circle. So they're different mutations of the same thing. I'm often accused of changing, and I say I never change, I mutate. One thing comes from another. And within that zone, I can play. And I can play with discovering things. And so I consider myself an explorer and not an artist. And I discover these things, but they're visual, compact. You can move them from one place to another. So these are different possible arrangements of them going on walls. This is a right angle wall. This painting is 6 feet wide. And that one is 78 inches wide. It's even wider than this, but the angle you can't tell. And 8 feet high. So they could go into a place, locate themselves as a place, as a statement of the phenomenal world. Whether you like them or not, that's not the point. And, you know, so much of the things that are going on that we're doing is about entertainment. We're bringing entertainment back into the so-called art world because it becomes desperate after a while. It doesn't know what to do. How do you respond to this phenomenal world as a shaman, as a shaker? Because the first guys that started doing these things were reacting to the world and making these pictorial statements. Bears, layers of these things in these cave paintings. 10, 20, 15,000 years go on. So you see different levels and different intentions by these tribal people who went in there. And there was always a few in them in a tribe. Sometimes they slept in a separate tent. Sometimes they joined right in. But there was the hunters and the magic men and the weavers and all of the different things. And when all those things got broke open, these people were thrown out. In other words, when the tribe broke down and the cities broke down, these people are thrown out with this genetic possibility of being the shaman in the tribe. So how does the shaman work now when he doesn't have a tribe and he has a city and these people are rocking around, confused, interfaced, in jail, out of jail, making millions, making nothing, be poverty? All these things are what the so-called shaman, or what we call the artist, he activates in that area, brings it out so the rest of us can see it. If he treats it like it's a business, then he's not treating it fairly to his audience, to his people, to the tribe, to the civilization. Red, yellow, and blue are a basic thing for abstract painters. This is a very subdued one. This is, stop, go back. Yeah, there. These are 4 large panels. Whether to put them together or not. There was gold under some of them. And then I put these pearlescent greens and pinks and blacks, gold on top of them. So they made a huge wall expanse. They made a physical place. Do they fit in the culture? Is that the point, that they fit in the culture? That's not my point. My point is just making them, and whatever happens, happens. And sometimes I like them. Sometimes I get rid of them. 3/4 of them I get rid of. Boop. All over.